I still can't shake the feeling that if I had done one thing differently, I might not be here to tell this story. I worked the night shift at a 24-hour diner off the highway. It wasn't a busy place, just the occasional trucker, a few locals, and sometimes people passing through town. I'd wipe down tables, refill the coffee pots, and listen to the hum of the neon sign outside. But one night, something changed. It was around 2 a.m. when he walked in. A man in his late 40s, wearing a suit that looked just a little too big for him. His hair was slicked back, but his face was pale and gaunt, like he hadn't slept in days. I was wiping down the counter when he took a seat at one of the stools and asked for a coffee. His voice was flat, emotionless. I nodded and poured him a cup, watching as he wrapped his long fingers around the mug, but didn't drink. Instead, he just stared at me, not in a creepy, flirty way, more like he was memorizing my face. For a few minutes, he just sat there, not saying a word. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "Do you ever feel like you're being watched?" I let out a nervous chuckle and replied, "Not really. Why?" He stirred his coffee once, then looked me dead in the eye and said I was being watched. I froze. The way he said it, it wasn't playful. It wasn't some weird joke. It was a statement. He took a slow sip of coffee, then set the mug down. "I think you should call the police." My stomach twisted. Why would I do that? His gaze didn't waver. "Because there's a man in your car." The words hit me like a punch. I felt my hands go numb as I stared at him. He went on to say, "He's been sitting in your back seat for about 20 minutes now." I couldn't breathe. I hadn't gone outside, hadn't checked my car since I started my shift, and I parked all the way in the back, where there were no security cameras. My heart pounded, and I asked him how he knew that. He didn't blink. I didn't know what to do. I glanced out the window, but my car was parked just beyond the glow of the streetlights. I couldn't see anything inside. My first instinct was to grab my phone, but the man shook his head. He asked me not to call the police and just act normal. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay still. He asked if I had a back exit. I nodded slowly. "Go, now," he said. I didn't hesitate. I turned and walked toward the kitchen, my legs feeling like jelly. I heard the bell above the diner door jingle. The man had left. I slipped into the back, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I didn't go outside. Not yet. Instead, I peeked through the kitchen window, just enough to see the parking lot. And that's when I saw him, a second man, stepping out of my car. He was tall, dressed in dark clothing, moving slowly, like he was waiting for something. Then he turned his head, and even from that distance, I knew he was looking for me. I stayed frozen, barely breathing. The man stood by my car for another few seconds, scanning the diner. Then, without warning, he turned and walked toward the highway. Not to another car, not to a gas station, just into the darkness, like he had all the time in the world. I waited until he was completely gone before I ran to my boss's office and locked the door. I called the cops. When they arrived, they found a knife on the floor of my back seat and a piece of rope tucked under the driver's seat. He had been waiting for me. The officer looked at me after taking my statement. Before the officer left, he said I was very lucky. Most people don't get a warning. I quit that job the next day, but I never found out who the man in the suit was. He never came back, never paid for his coffee, and I don't even know if he was trying to help me or if he was just testing me. I used to work the night shift at a small grocery store in a quiet town. It wasn't a 24-hour place, but we stayed open until 2 in the morning, and I was usually the one left to close up. It wasn't a bad job, just boring. A few late-night customers, mostly truckers or night owls grabbing snacks. Some nights, I'd go an entire hour without seeing a single soul. But there was something about working alone that made me uneasy. The silence, the way the aisles stretched into the distance, just dimly lit enough to make you question what you were seeing. Then there was the storage room. It was in the back of the store, down a short hallway past the bathrooms. The door was always slightly ajar, no matter how many times I closed it, and the light inside flickered. I never thought much of it, until the night I learned why. It started around 12:30 a.m. I was behind the counter, doing the usual, scrolling through my phone, half listening to the low hum of the security cameras. Then something changed. The air felt different. I didn't hear the usual hum of the refrigeration units. The store felt too quiet, like someone had pressed mute on everything around me. Then came the sound. A soft thud, somewhere toward the back of the store. I glanced at the cameras. The aisles were empty, but the storage room door was open wider than before. I knew I had shut it earlier. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the cold feeling creeping up my spine. Probably just a draft, I told myself. Still, I grabbed the flashlight from under the counter and made my way down the aisle. The moment I stepped into that back hallway, I felt it, like I was being watched. The storage room was dark, too dark. The flickering light had gone out completely. I hesitated. Then I heard it. Breathing, slow, deep, coming from inside the storage room. My first thought was that a homeless person had snuck in. It wouldn't have been the first time. I cleared my throat and shouted, "You shouldn't be here." All I got was silence. I hesitated, then slowly pushed the door open wider. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing rows of shelves stacked with extra inventory, cereal boxes, toilet paper, canned goods. That's when I saw it. A mattress, crumpled blankets, empty food wrappers, a plastic bottle filled with something yellow. Someone had been living here, recently. My pulse shot up. I took a step back, my grip tightening on the flashlight. And then, from the corner of the room, something moved. Not fast, not a sudden jump, just a shift. A shadow separating itself from the darkness. A man. He was crouched between the shelves, half hidden behind a stack of boxes, and he was smiling. My breath caught in my throat. He didn't lunge at me, didn't speak. He just sat there, watching me. His eyes were wide, unblinking. His clothes were filthy, his hair tangled. I forced myself to sound firm and told him that he can't be in there and he needed to leave. He didn't move. I took a step back, keeping the flashlight aimed at him, and said I was calling the cops. Then finally, he spoke, softly, almost a whisper. He said he knew. I blinked in confusion and asked him what he knew. He smiled wider and said, "I know you're alone." A cold chill shot through me. How long had he been watching me? How long had he been here? I didn't wait to find out. I bolted. I turned so fast I nearly tripped, sprinting back down the hallway toward the front of the store. Behind me, I heard him move. Fast. Footsteps pounding against the floor. He was chasing me. I rounded the corner, nearly slamming into the counter, fumbling for my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I managed to dial 911, gasping into the receiver. I told them there was someone in the store. "He's been hiding in the back. He's chasing me." The operator started asking questions, but I wasn't listening. I was too focused on the silence behind me. I turned around. He was gone. The cops showed up 10 minutes later. They searched the entire store, even checked the storage room. But he was gone. The back door, the one with the broken lock, was slightly open. They found his mattress, his food wrappers, the bottle, and they found something else. A notebook. It was filled with my name, pages and pages of times and dates. Notes about me. She works alone. She never locks the storage room. She never checks the back at night. She likes to hum when she stocks shelves. She doesn't see me watching. I quit the next day. To this day, I don't know how long he had been in there. How many nights he sat in the darkness, listening to me, watching me, waiting. And the worst part, they never caught him. He could be watching someone else now. Maybe someone who doesn't check the storage room. Maybe someone who's alone tonight. It was a slow night. I had been doing my usual rounds, checking the perimeter, making sure all units were locked when I heard it. A faint scraping sound, coming from the far end of the lot, near Unit 157. I paused, listening. At first, I thought it was just the wind. The rows of metal storage units created these weird echoes, making it hard to tell where a sound was coming from. But I heard it again, a deliberate sound, like something hitting a metal door. I sighed, probably just someone who forgot their code, messing with their lock. I walked over, flashlight in hand. Every door was shut. Every lock was in place. Then I saw it. Unit 157 had a different padlock than the others. I checked my log. 157 had been vacant for 2 months. No active rental. No new locks issued. Meaning, someone had put their own lock on it, and they weren't supposed to be there. I grabbed my radio and called in, letting them know we might have unauthorized access at Unit 157, and I was going to check it out. A pause. Then all I got was copy. Be careful. I didn't like that response. I radio in all the time, and no one ever tells me to be careful. I knocked on the metal door. No response. I knocked again, louder, while saying, "Storage facility security. This unit isn't rented. If you're in there, you need to leave." Silence. The padlock wasn't locked. It had just been looped through the latch. Someone wanted it to look locked, but still be able to get inside. That's when my stomach dropped. What if they were still in there? I grabbed my flashlight, slid the lock off, and pulled the door up. The metal rattled loudly, the sound bouncing between the units. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness. The unit was empty. Almost. In the far corner, against the metal wall, was a wooden chair. And sitting on the chair was a small black duffel bag. I should have left it alone. I should have called the cops. But my job was to check for violations. And this bag could have contained anything. Weapons, drugs, stolen property. I stepped inside, kneeling down. The bag was unzipped. Inside I saw a cheap prepaid phone, battery removed, a set of clothes, neatly folded, a bottle of water, half empty, and a notebook. I picked it up. Inside were lists of numbers, addresses, names, and on the very last page, today's date. Next to it, in small, careful handwriting, Unit 157, 3 a.m. I checked my watch. It was 2:53. A chill ran down my spine. Someone was planning to be here. Very soon. I quickly backed out of the unit, pulling the door down but not locking it. I didn't want to make it obvious someone had been inside. I stepped behind a nearby unit and waited. And at exactly 3 a.m., a car pulled into the lot. It was an old sedan, dark-colored, no plates. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. He was dressed in all black, hood up, gloves on. He moved quickly, like he'd done this 100 times before. He walked straight to Unit 157, unlocked it, and went inside. I waited. 1 minute, 2, then he came out carrying the bag. I couldn't tell if he had noticed anything off. He just locked the unit again, walked back to his car and drove off. No hesitation, no looking around, like he had somewhere to be. I went back to the security office, pulled the previous night's footage, and started checking timestamps. 3 a.m. Every night for the past 2 weeks, someone had come to Unit 157. Always a different person, always taking something small from the bag before leaving. And every time, the bag stayed behind, like it was being passed between them. I filed my report with management, who told me not to worry about it. But 2 days later, Unit 157 was cleaned out. The lock was gone, the bag was gone, and our records suddenly showed that the unit had never been rented in the first place. But I know what I saw, and I have a feeling whoever was using it knows I saw it too. I don't work there anymore, but sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, I check my mirrors a little too often, just to make sure no one's following me.